Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And with me today, I've got a guest who I'm interviewing, Rob Ryles. Welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Thanks, Lyn. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's more than a pleasure to have you on. The way that I got to know a bit about Rob was I actually did a post recently about masculinity, and Rob was very kind enough to respond and said he'd be happy to talk about masculinity to my listeners in relation to what his thoughts are around what that actually means. So, Rob, over to you. What do you feel is and what actually represents masculinity in your mind from your own thoughts and perceptions?
I think these things are very personal, but I think the archetypical masculinity things, the meanings that we associate with masculinity are probably things that most people could come out with, like strength, determination, courage, such things like that, bravery and you know, decision making and leadership, which actually is all well and good to be associated with masculinity, and I'm sure that if you did a poll of people, you would find that true. But that certainly doesn't represent, because all of those things could so easily and so much the same be applied to any female, any you know, feminine individual that you come across, because so I think we have to be aware of being too specific about thinking that these traits belong to this person or this set of people or that set of people. But for me, masculinity isn't just about those. It's about a balance, and I think there's two sides to these things. There's that side we've talked about, and there's also a balance side. Yeah, I hope that makes sense anyway.
Yeah, I think, you know, if my listeners have listened to previous episodes, they know that for me that there is a balance of both feminine and masculinity in all of us. But, you know, for me, what I educate people around is that we always have one core natural dominant energy, which is usually within the context of opposite sex relationships. It's the same as our gender. Would you agree with that? Yeah,
I certainly think that we as human beings, you know, whether you're male, female, you have a dominance of certain types of traits, and the manifestation of that would lead people to say, oh, there's a dominance of masculinity there because of what they associate with masculinity, or there's a dominance of feminism. I think if you were extremely compassionate in a situation, onlookers would say, Lyn, that there's a dominance of feminine characteristics. If you were particularly brave or appeared to be brave in a situation, people would say, well, that's a masculine trait. Now, you know, I hesitate to say that that's the case, but I think that's what's accepted. I don't think it's as black and white as that, but that's what's accepted. And in essence, you know, as long as we're all open to understanding and listening, there is nothing wrong with that. But you know, I think that's what history is the point history has brought us to.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's been true for us since mankind walked the earth, and womankind, I should say, to be politically correct, you know, it is what has worked in relationships, you know, since caveman times, is what actually still works in relationships today. It's just society has changed, and I do look at men today, and I think, you know, and see quite a lot of confusion around what masculinity means to them, and you know, how should they behave, because you know some masculine traits you know are tending to come across as being traits that shouldn't be displayed, because they're feared that, you know, that they might be perceived as being negative masculine traits. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I can see that, and I certainly think that that's been something that the media, not just recently, but probably in my lifetime, or certainly the latter half of my lifetime, has helped to portray that with, you know, with the highlighting of bullying, if you like, with the highlighting of abuse situations, with the highlighting of you
I suppose
know,
even wars.
yeah, the violence that whether that's you know, official violence that a government puts into place, or it's, you know, individual to individual. I think it's heavily portrayed to be masculine and dominated by males, and I'm sure the evidence does say that. And again, you know, the evidence is the evidence. So there we go. As men, if you know, we have to stand up and accept that, and rightly so, because you know, I'm certainly, as an individual, somebody who stands up and says, you know, that violence is not something that I want as part of my life. It's certainly not something I agree with, and it's all about doing everything else but that. As Winston Churchill said, it was, you know, you could portray Winston Churchill as one of the greatest icons of masculinity that's you know, existed in, it was coming from these isles. Blimey, you know, a bulldog, you know, he said George Yaw is better than War. Well, if you want an example of a trait that's mainly feminine, it's George Yaw. It's you know, because ladies seem to be far better at naturally talking about things than men do. So there we go.
Yeah, I do feel though that unfortunately there has been a miseducation and a misunderstanding around what is, you know, healthy in terms of masculine traits and what is unhealthy, because obviously violence, aggression, you know, possessiveness and controlling behavior, I would put under the banner of unhealthy, but women can be just as equally, you know, those things within a relationship. But there is healthy masculinity, and I think that's what's missing now, you know, because women do want, you know, especially strong women, do want healthy masculinity. They do want men to stand strong in their masculine energy, and they do want to feel safe and protected, and all the healthy things that the masculine male can stand for in terms of looking after his woman and treating her like a goddess and being chivalrous. Women do want all of that, but I think men are sometimes now, you know, because they're frightened of being perceived as being too masculine, stepping less into that.
Yes, and I think we were chatting a little bit before we went on air, Lyn, and I think you're absolutely right. I think the pendulum in terms of you know, media, social media, what's the accepted norm, has definitely swung away from that, and there is this, certainly at the moment, there's this time of change, this time of flux, and there's an uncertainty about roles. You know, the area that I come from, Stoke-on-Trent in the Midlands, is, you know, you could completely say, look, this is a working class area, and it's built on the potteries, the pits, and steelworks. And you know, when I was born and in the first couple of decades of my life, before things changed drastically, you know, the vast majority of men went out and did hard manual jobs, and probably the vast majority of the ladies, the feminine side of it, did less manual jobs, and there was much more of a divide. And as things have gone on and evolved, the roles have certainly become less defined, and much more men staying at home, or more acceptability of that. More men in care. I've worked in care myself, and certainly more males working in care, much more accepted. So yeah, and a balancing out, if you want to look at it as a balancing out, but alongside that balancing out, there's a certain change in the, what shall I say, the understanding of healthy and unhealthy, really, and I kind of understand that in a way, yeah, especially for young people. I don't think it's as easy. I think it's more complicated now, and whereas before, I don't think young people had to think about what was, okay, let's use the term politically correct, or how to describe things or people or genders. I don't think it was even a thought process, whereas now it is seemingly much more complex, and along with that complexity is uncertainty. So yeah, I take on board that comment about whether it's healthy or unhealthy to describe things in a certain way and attribute them to certain, masculine or feminine.
Do you think young men, I suppose, because you see a lot, I suppose, of in the family homes now, women being mainly single parents, and obviously their sons are going to be influenced more by their mothers, because quite often the fathers are absent, or there's no strong male role models in their home environment, and so boys are growing up to be more, taking on more feminine traits, and on the back of, I suppose, the drive towards equality and equal pay and equal rights, that there's been some sort of education for women whereby, when we've been educated and parented to be more like men, so we look at men as our role models in the workplace, so we've took on more masculine traits, and so there's not the polarization of the feminine and masculine in relationships now. There's more of that gender neutrality, which is fine. That's what creates friendships in terms of relationships, as having things in common and being the same. But for me, what I've discovered is it doesn't create passion. It doesn't create a relationship that's alive, because the polarity has been lost.
There's an awful lot in there, Lynn, and I think, blimey, but going back to the start of the point, I definitely recognise that in the current or the present environment, where there are, and I'm sure there are, a lot more one-parent families, and probably, and I do say probably because I don't know the statistics, but predominantly they are led by a woman, the mother figure, whether that's a grandmother or an auntie, is I do, and I have seen it, and I do see it, and I have personal experience of it, whereby young children, even going into adolescence, that because of the lack of masculine figure, or a masculine figure, or masculine dominance in their life, or a balancing, there is this, it has an effect. And I think it's a negative effect, because they often, or the children, the ones who are subject to this, do not know how to respond, and they don't respond positively to masculine traits. And I think that leads on to question marks in the future, and it influences them, if that makes sense, Lynn.
It does definitely make sense.
And I think that I've certainly got experience of a workplace situation whereby the way that things were portrayed and the way that communication was done became an issue, because the person who thought it was an issue didn't like the way it was done. And for me, I'm not going to go into specifics, but for me, this was just a male way of doing things, of coming to a conclusion, saying something strongly. There was no abuse, there was no violence. It was just a straightforward way of communicating.
Assertiveness.
Correct. Great. You summed it up. That's the word I was looking for. Absolutely right. And then basically the person objected, and there was an issue around it. And actually, there was only an issue around it because in taking a step back and analysing the situation, I honestly think that the person who made the issue out of it was somebody who couldn't recognise this method of communication. And for me, it was. And again, I don't, this is, your dad saying to you, this is how it's done. I'm telling you, end of chat. And that is the end of the chat, But I think that had never been experienced. I think it almost like blimey, and I've worked in professional football, at cutting edge professional football, and at the cutting edge where results are everything. And if you wanted to get an archetypical masculine environment, there exists one with many characteristics. And people will say years and years ago that it's the language's choice, that that it's borderline. It's not just assertive; it's borderline aggressive. And I've also worked in care environments at certain points in my life, and you couldn't get two different approaches. But all it takes is a recognition of what's appropriate at a particular time. And if you are able to bring out those skills and those understandings and that communicating ability in different environments, then you'll be okay. It's a recognition of what's appropriate for the situation, Lyn.
I 100% agree, because like you say, in a masculine sort of, I suppose, dressing room environment, there would be different language that would be considered fine and appropriate, which would be, like you say, all around, mainly masculine traits that would be totally unacceptable in a care environment where it's mainly, your feminine, compassionate, nurturing traits that come to the fore in that scenario. So 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And having said that, Lyn, I've been fortunate enough to work in quite a few different aspects of football, and I've worked in on the ladies' side of the game as well. And I'm certainly not sitting here saying that effing and jeffing and using bad language and profanities is the way forward. What I'm saying is that if that goes on, it goes on, and as long as nobody's offended by it and affected by it and is forced into it, then all well and good. So I'm certainly not saying it is the only way and it's the right way. But to say it doesn't exist is not telling the truth.
That's true. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying.
I've worked in on the women's side of the game as well, and I've worked in. So I go into the I've been in the dressing room and in a professional way, and at certain times, because I'm a male, I will leave the dressing room. I've left the dressing room at a certain time so that the players can get changed and all that kind of thing. So it's recognizing that there are needs and requirements that are appropriate for different environments, and I think that comes from, I would like to think that it's a healthy perspective on things, rather than saying, well, one's right and one's wrong. It is what it is, and you act appropriately in the situation.
Yeah, I understand, and I absolutely agree. What are your thoughts? I mean, switching to your sort of, I suppose, your area of expertise and the fact that your background and your history and your involvement has been with working with youths and within the environment of football. How do the players compare? I mean, I have to laugh as a woman when I see a game of football and I see, a footballer only has to get slightly tapped and he goes onto the floor and rolls around like, he's been shot. And yeah, I see a rugby game and I see them, have blood pouring off their faces and they break their legs and they're more or less back on the pitch in 5 minutes because, they just shrug it off. And I'm thinking, the men in football look so... from a women's perspective anyway, it's like, how pathetic. Yeah. But when you see the guys in the rugby field, you think, yeah, that's a proper man.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lyn, as somebody who is in the football industry, and I don't like it. And for me, I think it is downright, absolute, 100% total cheating. And if it was anything to do with me, I would do anything I could to eradicate it from the game, and do whatever I could to help people realize that is not the way forward. Because I would rather put my head on the pillow at night time, Lyn, having lost a game, knowing that the team that I'm involved with has acted in what I would call a proper way, in line with all the values that we have, whether we've won or lost, rather than put my head on the pillow at night knowing that the team has won something, but it has won something with just one of our players rolling around on the floor trying to get something out of the referee that they are not entitled to, that has cheated the other team. And basically you've won something that you don't deserve. Now, that is a subjective opinion. It's my opinion, but it's what I believe in. And, do I think it's great for the game? No, absolutely not. I don't. I totally agree with you. So, yeah.
Well, certainly I don't think as a woman, and a woman who's now learnt how to be, and how to utilize a feminine energy to great effect in terms of creating, my own passionate relationship that's really vibrant and alive, and that I think a lot of people aspire to have in their own relationships. When I look at things like that, that is not attractive, when I see that on the football field. So perhaps the players need to be informed that, they're not impressing the women when they do things like that.
Yeah, and look, Lyn, I have no idea whether their thought processes go as far, or anybody who takes those kind of actions, what their thought processes are. For me, I like to think that actually it's an individual. I would like people to be educated. I mean, one of the things just going back a little bit, is that some of the great coaches that I admire and I aim to take things out of their book, if you like, and aim to aspire to be like, are the coaches who say, I'm not here to create great athletes, great players, great basketball players, or baseball players or football players, because of some of the coaches from other sports that I admire equally as well. I'm here to create good men. And do you know what? I absolutely fundamentally believe in that, because if any of my players turn around to me and say, Rob, thanks for our relationship for the past 3 years, but I'm actually going to leave the game and I'm going to be XYZ, I would pat them on the back and say, it's been great to know you, knowing that actually what we've been through in the educational process of their football has got principles running through it that will enable them hopefully to go on and have in inverted commas, a successful life, irrelevant of whether it's related to being technically good at the game. So that's much more important to me than a short-term gain of somebody being great at a particular technical skill at the deficit of them actually doing it in a also having a characteristic that allows them to cheat. And I don't think that's successful at all, and I wouldn't view that as success at all.
I love what you just said there. So a great coach is actually producing from the players not just great skills and abilities within the game, but actually wanting to educate their players to be great men, and be better men for having served under them, regardless of whether they go on to continue in the game or not, than what they were prior to them, coming to them in the first place at the start.
Absolutely, Lyn, and that's the fundamental place that is the bedrock of where I come from as a person and as an individual, and going back to the people that I am inspired by, the greats like Bill Shankly and Jock Stein and people like that. These are people who are good, strong men of character, and it doesn't matter take them out of that football environment, and you would still have those men who would be leaders and you would follow because of their character. And it just so happens that their passion was football, and they made their living out of something that they loved, and that they went on to have great success. But, you know, the greats for me are great men and people, not great coaches or just great coaches. It's pretty much as simple as that, really, Lyn. And yeah, that's, you know, something that I'm really passionate about.
I love that. Yeah, because like you say, take them out of that environment. You've still got that man who has those great masculine characteristics and traits, regardless, you know, of whether he's in that sort of competitive profession or not. If he's in even the corporate world, like you say, he'd probably still be a leader within that environment.
Yeah, and you know, there's one of the great things that's I heard once was, what you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can stand there for 7 years espousing this, that, and the other, but actually, none of us are stupid, Lyn. I think none of us are stupid. And, you know, if you are what you are, people follow you and love you, and you become to them what they want you to become, because you are what you are, not because what you say. And that for me is a fundamental, and the fundamental of anything, if you like, particularly leadership. And you know, if I don't know, just one young man goes out and has a good life, a better life, because he's been on my team and he's been in my football pitch, whether or not he becomes a great player, actually that's a secondary thing. But you know, if he phones me up and says, you know what, yeah, I love you, mate, because of X, Y, Z, hey, job done for me.
Excellent. Love that. What would your advice be, or what do you actually implement, maybe in the context of being a coach, you know, to sort of channel, if you can see, you know, that some of these lads must be, you know, quite young and probably, you know, going through that sort of almost still puberty, adolescence phase, and they're still trying to manage their natural masculine aggression in a positive way. What sort of skills do you give them to sort of channel that energy in a positive way?
It's a great question. It's a great question for football and for young sports people. It's a fabulous question. And in the last few years, I heard some of the coaches at quite a high level were talking about allowing players to play on the edge. And they were talking about a particular player, somebody who's a household name. And this player has got or has had issues in the past with a temper, and a few issues with you know, being booked and getting sent off and losing. And it was all about, the conversation went along about allowing them to, and the phrase they used was playing on the edge. And this was like allowing them to be just over the border of, you know, and letting them get away with things. That was the nature of the conversation. And fundamentally, I kind of got where they were coming from, but I actually disagreed with that, because if we just talk about maximizing performance, Lyn, it's all about having a total focus. And if anything takes your focus away, then it will only have a negative effect. And if people start to become angry, they say the easiest boxer in the world to defeat is one who's angry. So take that to football. If you know, one of the key things in football is that if you want to get a result, if you can rile the other team up, if you can get into somebody's head, if you can anger them, if you can, you know, there's that famous World Cup final incident where Zidane, the world's greatest player, you know, Zinedine Zidane, got sent off in the first half because somebody said something to him, you know, very, very insulting, and he headbutted them because he couldn't control himself, and the result speaks for himself. But so it's about going back to the question, Lyn. It's a massive question. It's a brilliant question, and it's about showing young people, young men, how to control this amazing amount of energy they've got, how to control these emotions and channel it so that all that beautiful, amazing energy that they've got goes into the right funnel and is not frittered away chasing somebody who you're angry with, and who eventually after 90 minutes has won because all your energy's gone into getting them back when actually should have gone into creating what you want, not what they want. And in terms of how do you do it, I think it's about pointing out to people. So when you see that little red mist start to descend, which you do as a coach if you observe properly, it's about maybe pulling them out for a minute and giving them that 30-second breather. And whether they know it or not, you're just kind of giving them a little bit of putting the brake on them, and then allowing them to go back in. Or if you see it on the pitch, we have done it myself where I've actually substituted the player, and they come off and they might want to kick a bottle, or they might want to throw the shirt down, or they might want to cry or whatever. And you might not get the result you want, but it might be a week or a month or a day later when they actually have a recognition that actually you've done it for the right reasons, although they hate you for doing it at the time. The easiest thing, Lyn, in today's society is to let it go on.
Yes.
The hard thing is to take a stand. It's not something I find hard because I believe in it. And thankfully the club's as fully supportive of that. So it's easy to do when you get supported. But yeah, I think it's a fundamental. I think you do your players a disservice if you don't do that. And I just think it's about being observant. It's about being brave enough to step in and to have those difficult conversations at times. And sometimes with young players, the way the world is, you also have to have that conversation with a parent as well, because it might be that all the parent sees is that you're giving their kid a hard time, or you're pulling that kid off, or you're not giving them the same amount of game time as they want. So you need maybe to have a conversation not only with the child but with the parent as well. And if that parent is on your side, it's great, but maybe you have situations where they're not. But do you stand by your principles or don't you? That would become the question then.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear that you're, the future of young men going through the process of being coached, certainly in the environment where you are coming out better young men for it out the other side. So we have that to look forward to, and I'm grateful there's guys like you in that environment that can look after and nurture these guys to become the men that the young men want. It's great to hear.
Well, I hope so, Lyn. It's just my way of doing it, and I'm certainly not the only one. We've been at a great club. But I like to think that, what you do on the sports ground, the training ground, in the dressing room represents what you'd want in the rest of your life. I think, synchronicity and authenticity and being yourself all through all aspects of your life is a great thing to aim for. It's all right saying we do this the right way, we do that the right way, we do the other the right way, whether it's masculine or feminine, then go out and do the opposite. That's or talk the opposite or whatever. It's all about trying to be as aligned as possible and standing up for what we think is right and what we believe in.
Excellent. Well, I'm loving what you stand for, Rob. On that note, we're coming to the end of this episode. So would you like to tell the listeners your details? I will make sure these are included in the show notes, but is there a website or any contact information you'd just like to give the listeners just before we end?
Yeah, my brand is Leader, Manager, Coach, which is all the three things that I love and I stand for. And my website's www.robryles.co.uk, robryles.co.uk. It's called Leader Manager Coach. I have a podcast called Leader Manager Coach where we discuss all things to do with leadership, to do with management, to do with coaching, with all these principles that run through it that are very poignant and appropriate and applicable to football and sport, but also the wider aspect of life as well. So if anybody wants to take a look at that, that'll be great. And my contact details are on there. I do a little bit of it, not a great deal, but I post on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to catch me on there, if you put my name in there, you'll I'm sure we can connect. But always happy to chat about things like that.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Rob. That's been a really interesting and fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed that. So there you go, listeners. You can contact Rob on those various bits of contact information that he's just reiterated, and I'll make sure that information is also contained within this episode's show notes.
That's great.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks, Lyn.
And listeners, always remember, true love starts with opening your hearts. So until next time, for now, take care and goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.